Welcome back to the Logistics Leadership Podcast. Once again, I am Karl Siebrecht, your host. Today, I am with a renowned parcel industry expert, Nate Skiver, who is the founder of LPF Spend Management and also has a long career in parcel, specifically in retail. Nate, it is great to have you with us.
I really appreciate being on the show, Karl.
I always find that you have very insightful, interesting, and sometimes even humorous things to say about the industry. So I greatly appreciate that and thought that we should share some of that wisdom and perspective with this audience here on the pod. So let's start by just finding out from you a little bit more about just generally who you are and what you do.
Absolutely. So Nate Skiver, I'm the founder of LPF Spend Management, which essentially means I'm an independent consultant. I've been consulting for about 5 years, almost to the day at this point. And I work a lot with package shippers, often retailers, to help them negotiate better contracts, select the right delivery partners, and really develop delivery and shipping strategy. I also advise carriers. I was a customer of carriers for quite a long time in retail for 17 years. And so I help carriers compete in the package delivery market. Before all that, 5 years of consulting, 17 years in retail with companies like Abercrombie and Fitch and Gap Inc. And most of that experience was focused on parcel, helping to build and manage parcel programs, throughout those 17 years. So in some way, it's been all or nearly all focused on parcel for 20 plus years.
That's great. Well, we're excited to dig into some of the things you've learned. And again, just get your perspective on what's going on in the last mile, specifically the parcel market. There is a lot going on. So I thought maybe a way to frame this conversation would be to talk about it from both the demand side perspective, so both consumer demand and the demands of shippers, the customers here, the enterprise customers, and then talk about the supply side of the industry, those providers in the market, both the legacy providers, some of the newer providers, and the dynamics there. Does that sound good?
Absolutely.
Great. So to tee up the demand side, I want to rattle off a couple of stats here that I pulled just before we got on the pod here. So the kind of arms race between Walmart and Amazon as they talk about how many same day and next day units they are shipping. So from May of 24, Walmart announced that they had shipped 4.4 billion units just in the US over the trailing 12 months. So 4.4 billion units in the US in the past year, leading up to May. Then Amazon, just at the end of July, announced that they had shipped 5 billion units same day or next day globally just in the last 7 months. So again, there's this arms race. I actually find it fascinating in and of itself that these two big companies kind of on almost a quarterly basis are updating their stats. What do you make of this?
I didn't catch details of Walmart's earnings that they just released in the last few days, but I wonder if they chose to either forego their update because maybe they're trailing a little bit, or if they actually put something out there. So, but it's kind of a back and forth, and really, I mean, no matter how they frame it or choose to communicate it, it shows where their focus is in serving customers, in growing revenue with customers, and I think those two companies are pretty good examples of driving success in that area. So it can't be by accident that they've collectively delivered. We'll just call it 10 billion items or so next day or same day in the last 12 months or probably less. And they'll share statistics every once in a while about how much conversion that drives, or Amazon will state that when or because of fast delivery that customers shop with them more often and they spend more. And so if that's there, then that just means that they're doing something right. They're driving a lot of consumer expectation in the market, and in some way, other companies have to try to compete in however they can.
Right, right. So implication for consumer demand is there must be demand for this because they're certainly uh, delivering against that expectation more and more. In fact, in that same Amazon post, they uh, announced that this was up 30% year over year. By the way, the other thing that they have shared is that they intend to double the amount of physical infrastructure they currently have against that same day, next day capability. So clearly, this means there is consumer demand for it, or they wouldn't be investing against it.
Right.
I guess there's a question of, what came first, the chicken or the egg? You had mentioned a comment once about that I had read or heard around kind of Amazon almost creating this consumer demand.
Yes, I feel like, and I mean, I guess a lot of what you just mentioned of the planned investment. They're one of probably the only company that can invest that much and generate that demand. So they're building the infrastructure to obviously, I guess, serve the demand they have, but generate more. And I don't think that's really necessarily an expectation for pretty much any other retailer, perhaps Walmart. And that's what part of what makes Amazon unique and is a differentiator, because if they're creating that demand and expectation, where else is that consumer going to be served that well?
Right.
Amazon. And so it's a kind of really a competitive moat that they've at least attempted to create, because really no one else, save for perhaps Walmart, can replicate that level of fast delivery.
Right. Right. So staying on the demand side, then let's talk about the demand for evolving last mile or parcel capabilities, fast shipping from other retailers, other shippers, not called Walmart and Amazon. What is the implication of what Amazon and Walmart are doing on these other retailers?
It's interesting because I think just from a transportation standpoint, I don't know that there is a need for novel, unique delivery solutions. You still have to have people, trucks move packages and deliver them. So I think
Right.
from a service provider standpoint, so seeking out service providers, retailers still expect very high quality service, very reliable. Um, just so happens right now, because overall demand has been interesting. We're talking about Amazon and Walmart. Outside of those two, what generates package volume, which is demand in the sense, from retailers, there's not a whole lot of growth there. And so
Hmm.
retailers uh, are getting some pretty good pricing from these carriers. But in addition to that price, they need service quality, they need reliability, and they need to find solutions that align with largely their fulfillment network, which is a massive factor to serving the customer,
Right.
and how they being the retailers, delivery speed. Because it's not realistic, really, for many
Right.
retailers to say, I'm going to go toe to toe with Amazon or Walmart. I think they have to be intentional with what they want to do with delivery speed, but
Hmm.
make it to where it's kind of within the framework that they have with fulfillment and delivery, or if it's not, determine what they need to do to improve it.
Okay. So let me play back what I think I heard just to confirm. So what you're seeing in the parcel market is for, I don't know how to get the adjective right here, but in the traditional parcel market, there is not much increasing demand for units shipped, and so the pricing has been relatively favorable for shippers for that traditional parcel service.
Yes.
Are you seeing, okay, are you seeing, is there more demand from shippers for faster delivery, faster than that traditional parcel service? Are you seeing an uptick in demand for that, call it same day or next day service level?
I believe there is. It's not a say a step change in the market where all retailers are expecting or trying to speed up delivery, and they're seeking, say, alternative carriers to help do that. But I think
Mhm.
enough retailers are conscious of the need for faster delivery, maybe more flexibility from a delivery provider than, say, a UPS or FedEx might provide. And so there's
Mhm.
enough of those retailers who are being really intentional about how they design their delivery program, what they need from say a final mile provider who can flex more with their volume needs. And so there, I would say there's a trend of more retailers being more intentional about evaluating those alternatives because UPS and FedEx can't always meet those needs, say, best in market.
Okay. Okay, great. So that's actually a perfect transition point to talking about the supply side of the market. So, from your perspective of the service providers, what are the big dynamics? You've already sort of touched on that. Let's start with the traditional carriers. I read things about, and forgive me, I don't remember if it's one or the other or both, actually basically taking capacity offline. um, is that a big dynamic? Did I get that right? What's going on with the traditional carriers?
Yeah, to an extent, traditional carriers and UPS and FedEx are the ones in the market that drive a lot of really, I guess, the supply in the market
Mhm.
is both maybe in different ways, but they're both trying to improve efficiency within their network, and a lot of that has to do with automation. In some cases, in FedEx's case, they're actually combining a ground and express separate operating networks, and
Right.
so they're just organically there is a little bit of capacity being taken out of the market, but I would think of it as more kind of right sizing the capacity to the demand. And they're both trying to do that while, I guess, maintaining or increasing the flexibility, operational flexibility to do so. So being
Okay.
more, having more automation, which then lowers your unit costs. And so they're
Hmm.
able to do that while taking some capacity out of the network. Um, and they're in that position somewhat because they're a little bit over capacity from expanding a few years ago,
Right.
when demand thought we thought demand was just not infinitely but going to keep going up and to the right, and
Yep.
that didn't happen. And so now they're kind of rationalizing or right sizing their networks.
Got it. And given how much volume Amazon is now servicing through its own infrastructure, has that had an impact on kind of effectively pulling package volume off of the traditional carriers' networks?
Yes, definitely has, and like directly, specifically, more so UPS and the postal
Hmm.
service.
Right.
And so, yes, there's Amazon has had organic package volume growth, but largely they've consumed a lot of that from a delivery standpoint and delivered it themselves.
That's right. Yeah, got it. Okay, so traditional carriers spend a focus on efficiency, productivity, profitability, right sizing their capacity a little bit. Um, okay, so then share your thoughts on the other last mile carriers. What's going on there? It's an ecosystem that seemed to be proliferating. There's a lot of logos that you can cram in on some of those visuals that
Right,
you've
right.
created. What's going on there? Give us your perspective.
Yeah, it's an interesting time because a lot of those call them new market entrants or recent market entrants are uh, last mile providers. Some of them are almost entirely technology providers who are kind of orchestrating different parts of that transportation, first, middle, and last
Mm-hmm.
mile. And then there's, I guess, traditional regional parcel carriers that have been in the market for quite some time. And some of them have gained some traction or are in the market altogether because of the volume like explosion really in 2020 and 2021. And a lot of funding came with that, and some startups were able to either enter the market or raise some rounds to expand. And so it's good in many cases because it provides back to I guess the demand side, but provides options to package carriers. Excuse me,
Mm-hmm.
to retailers,
Shippers. Mm-hmm.
and uh, but what's happened is you mentioned the word proliferation. I think was pretty accurate. Is that there are too many providers in the market? Honestly, I think to be sustained with the amount of demand in the market right now. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's part of also then what's driving some of the favorable pricing for package shippers is there are many competitors, and UPS and FedEx have to respond to that in some way with price. And so those pricing dynamics are still favorable and have been, to be honest, for probably the last 18 months.
Okay. Got it. And is there a sub-segment of those newer entrants, or frankly, even the more traditional regional carriers? Is there a subset that are focused particularly on that faster delivery promise, that kind of next day speed? Um, yeah, that's my first question. Is that true, or is that kind of not specifically
No, I think
true?
I think there's a segment. I'll kind of provide two answers or two groups maybe. There is a
Okay.
segment that are final mile carriers. I mean, I'll just use an example, maybe like a VHO that
Okay.
is very much focused on not just fast delivery. It's usually next day delivery, but also the customer experience. That's they
Okay.
are positioned as more of a delivery experience provider, and part of that is the service of delivering packages. But fast delivery, like local next day in probably 30 markets in the U.S. There are
Hmm.
providers like that, and there's
Okay.
some that have grown since, say, the COVID volume kind of explosion. And
Hmm.
then I guess another example would be OnTrack, where OnTrack is they're a regional carrier still, but they've really expanded their network. They've connected regional networks on, I guess, kind of both coasts and started to fill in the middle part of the U.S.
Hmm.
But part of their value proposition that they pitch is being faster than UPS and FedEx in many cases. They deliver more on the weekends than at least than UPS. And so they are trying to very specifically target that delivery speed demand with e-commerce delivery.
Is it the case that the network that FedEx and UPS has built out over many, many, many decades, it's incredibly robust, expansive, is that not built appropriately for faster delivery? Whereas some of the newer competitors can come along with a blank sheet of paper and build a network that is optimized for faster delivery, call it that next day delivery. Is that true, or is that not as clearly a difference?
I think that's true, but I think the way that the networks of UPS and FedEx were designed, a very long time ago, was to service commercial, business, package
Right.
customers, and the complexity isn't nearly as much as residential. There's a lot of favorable things about delivering to commercial location. Along the way, to your point, UPS and FedEx have really developed a more responsive network, and it has gotten much faster. But the value that they really provide, they being UPS and FedEx, is that comprehensive national network. And so shipping from coast to coast, long distances, that's
Hmm.
where, at least for the time being, their value is really, really apparent, because no, their networks aren't as maybe flexible or responsive as some regional carriers or some final mile carriers in that shorter distance. And
Okay.
then that's where those carriers try to focus on, those being the alternatives, because it's a shorter distance. Uh, they can service it well very quickly, and I mean that's where the volume is.
Right. Right. Okay. And maybe last question on this specific topic is, could you just touch on same day specifically? So same day shipping has this whole other requirement of actually having inventory very, very close to demand centers. Whereas to get there next day, you could do some zone skipping, some injection, these kinds of things. What are you seeing in terms of same day? Is the demand for that um, across retailer shippers? Are you seeing them wanting to do more and more same day volume, and any kind of meaningful increase in demand, or not really? Or what are you seeing?
Largely, I think same day still is very much kind of product specific or product assortment specific, in that
Mm-hmm.
the categories that you would assume would maybe have high demand of, kind of like day-to-day essentials, whether it's uh, things like prescriptions, like those are
Mm-hmm.
obvious that where there's going to be
Mm-hmm.
demand. Say specialty retail, maybe apparel is probably a good example where, um, I'm not seeing just organic like high demand to where a lot of apparel retailers are offering same day broadly and making it a very specific intentional part of their strategy. Now,
Okay.
in addition to maybe the demand not being there, practically speaking, apparel's not the product category that you want to try to distribute to, you know, 200, 300 distribution points with the intention of delivering it same day.
Right.
So I think in that case, just using the apparel as an example, there are plenty of apparel retailers who offer same day or have recently done that. And I think it's more so just to have that as a customer option, not to really move the needle on demand or, really the bottom line.
Right. Right. Got it. Okay. So we've talked about kind of market dynamics quite a bit. Let's kind of narrow in on um, your advice, if you will, for shippers, retailers. If you're a Fortune 1,000 retailer, um, and you are now going to evaluate your parcel capabilities, what advice would you have for somebody who's ready to embark on that effort?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with something kind of vague and obvious, but it's to define an intentional strategy around parcel and package delivery. And I say that because I don't know that, definitely not all retailers, or some retailers really do that. And that's because years ago, it was very common just to have, I'm going to work with one primary national carrier. They can meet almost all of my needs, pretty well, and I don't really need to do anything more than that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that's not the case anymore, and so what really the requirement is to kind of define it or build it from the ground up and say, what role does delivery speed play in my strategy?
Mm-hmm.
How are what are the cost and service goals that I need to set, that also aligns with delivery speed and other factors? Then go look and see, how are you performing against those now? Is
Mm-hmm.
Are your carriers, if you only have say one or two, actually meeting those goals? Assuming they're not, then let's go source those carriers that meet specific, delivery speed needs, whether it's same day or it's local next day. So just developing that with intention, and not, for lack of a better term, kind of keeping it simple and taking the easy way out of just saying UPS and FedEx or one of them do a solid job, and I'm just going to stay with them.
Got it. And so this foots with again sort of general trends that I've read about, where it seems like, or at least I've heard or read, that on average retailers or shippers are adding more carriers to their portfolio. They're expanding from that kind of more legacy approach of having one to adding a few others to basically provide that kind of flexibility that you've referred to a few times.
Yes, and carrier diversification is really what that is, and that's not a new concept, but it's definitely something I think, partially because of maybe the market conditions around 2020 and the volume surge, really brought about a necessity to add carriers, evaluate alternatives because of capacity needs, things like that. And so I think since then, the awareness and need of a diverse carrier base has persisted. And that then coupled with, there's better shipping technology in the market than there has been in the past. We've already talked about the more than enough delivery providers as well. And so you combine those things, I think is what's driving a higher number of carriers that many retailers partner with.
Got it. Okay, super helpful. We'll shift gears here for a second and talk about what you see happening down the road. Very generally first, what is your big prediction or a couple of predictions for kind of major things that are likely to happen in logistics 3 years from now?
Yeah, I don't know if this would be considered a big prediction or not. It might just be a math problem that plays out, but I see Amazon delivering more packages than UPS and FedEx combined. And now I don't think it's going to be this disruptive thing where Amazon has 30% of the package delivery market outside of their own volume, but more so, again, this is the math part of just their organic package volume growth. And as they, being Amazon, continue to deliver a higher percentage of that, their volume is going to grow quite a bit. And if package volume outside of Amazon in the market doesn't necessarily grow that much, or at least at the same rate, UPS and FedEx are competing with at least right now, dozens of other carriers for that volume. And so that continues to have an effect on the market of, again, Amazon driving growth, but not really making it available, I guess, necessarily externally. One other, I think, just along with that part of the impact, this is not just Amazon specific, but just market dynamics of continued competition, is I think UPS and FedEx will really have to diversify their business more than they are now, in addition to package delivery. Now, not exactly sure where that will reside, but UPS is, I think, probably a little bit ahead of FedEx in that regard. But package delivery, from a pricing standpoint and capabilities, continues to be more competitive. And 3 years' time, I think we'll see UPS and FedEx, their market share decline, not drop off a cliff, and they'll need other ways, I think, to generate revenue and provide value to retailers.
Got it. Okay, that's a good one. Next question. Would love your thoughts on AI. Obviously, even well outside of logistics, it's a huge topic. Is it going to change the world? Is it overblown? Specific to logistics, where do you see, if anywhere, kind of near-term impact on driving the productivity or the efficiency, or just sort of anything that's up and to the right? Where do you see AI having a near-term impact in logistics, if anywhere?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're starting to see that, and I'll focus mostly on Parcel, but surface now in a few different areas. I mean, one is some carriers, delivery providers are using AI in some way to be more precise on delivery times. On there's certain technology providers that orchestrate their delivery partners, and they can dynamically, based on current conditions, be it weather and some other things, select the right delivery partner that is going to deliver the fastest and provide a very specific estimated delivery date back to the customer. And so that's
Okay.
where we're seeing that now. Uh, Also, pricing, parcel pricing, and UPS has been a little bit more, I guess, public about that in some way, using AI to, and dynamic pricing is probably not the right word, because in my opinion, dynamic is literally in the moment, but
Yep.
of being much more precise with aligning pricing to cost at a very, very granular level. That's real kind of dynamically changing to an extent by customer, by the time
Hmm.
that they provide a pricing proposal, different than in the past of give me all your data and I'll provide a proposal here in 2 weeks. They're using, it's not all just AI, but that is part of it, to really
Hmm.
increase the velocity on being able to provide pricing. So
Hmm.
those are
Okay.
two areas. I mean, another one, which Karl, you probably know more about this than I do, but the ability to predict demand and then also place inventory. Uh,
Right.
that's a topic that probably deserves its own conversation, but um, a big impact on package delivery for sure, because it
Yes.
it reduces the delivery time, delivery distance, presumably cost. So I think that's probably the other big area too.
Right. Yeah, those are great. Those are great. And on that third one, we do spend a lot of time on that. And one of the insights we've come across is actually less about being more precise in your forecast. Of course, everybody wants to and should try as hard as they can to be precise, but actually being aware of where your uncertainty is greater. Where does the uncertainty lie, and what am I going to do about that? That's probably as valuable, if not, I think in many cases, more valuable than trying to be precisely correct. In part because it's pretty near impossible to be precisely correct, because events, turns out many types of events are random. Anyway, as you said, that's probably a conversation for a different day, but that's great. Yeah, those are three things where you're seeing impact from AI, and they all resonate and are kind of near and dear to what we're seeing as well. Okay, last question for you. You've been in the logistics industry for a long time, five years as a consultant with lots of different customers, many years before that with retailers. What is the craziest or most surprising thing you've seen kind of out there in the field?
So that's one. Being in retail for a long time and working, I'll say, for a retailer, maybe at the time with a very eccentric leader, you get some really weird requests of tracking packages that you didn't expect to be doing, things like that. And so one of those happened to be, I I'll explain this. Let me just say it first, to track a human being. And so why I had to do that was I was working for Abercrombie and Fitch. I mean, and they were opening a store in Milan. And before the store opening, there were 200 units of denim that had to get from Guatemala to Milan next day. And
Okay.
after all the relevant, I guess, kind of options were exhausted of chartering a plane and some other things, the decision was to send an associate from the factory in Guatemala to Milan to carry as luggage these 200 units of denim. So that was the strangest thing. I mean, my part of this was I tracked his flight and then provided updates to the leadership team on his status. Yes, he arrived at Heathrow and met our customs agent and has now, cleared customs and should be on a train to Milan in 2 hours, like that type of thing. So that's probably
That's
the strangest
fantastic.
one.
Did he make it in time?
He did, yes,
Yeah.
and it actually wasn't even for the store opening itself. It was just for the CEO to walk through and see the store before it opened. So,
Oh boy.
yes, it made it.
All right. Well, Nate Skiver, it's been a real pleasure talking with you today. Thank you for your time and sharing your insights with us. We really appreciate it.
I really enjoyed it, Karl. Thanks.